この戦いには絶対に勝つ。
Dead or Alive 2, also known as DOA 2, is a fighting game developed by Team Ninja and released for arcades in 1999. The first game in the series was released as Dead or Alive in 1996 for arcades, with ports released for Sega Saturn and PlayStation. It was created by director and producer Tomonobu Itagaki, who started as a programmer for Tecmo in 1992. Itagaki's inspiration for the series derived from the Virtua Fighter, Fatal Fury and the Mortal Kombat series, with DOA's sexual appeal drawn from the former series, and the ability to knock opponents off landscapes from the latter. The game was well praised for its fighting system and advanced graphics, which made it a commercial success, helping Tecmo overcome their financial problems they had at the time. Itagaki developed the first 4 installments, but has since left the company and is no longer working on the series, which continues without him. The series revolves around the events of the Dead or Alive World Combat Championship, an international martial arts tournament where fighters from across the globe participate in for the title of World Champion and large cash prizes. The tournaments are held by the Dead or Alive Tournament Executive Committee, shortened to DOTEC. The plot of DOA 2 focuses on an evil Tengu, who escapes from the Tengu world into the human world, and the Dead or Alive tournament's change in purpose and significance after the murder of DOTEC's founder and CEO, Fame Douglas. DOA 2's graphics and gameplay were enhanced and based on a better game engine than the one used in the first game. Running on the Sega Naomi arcade board, it allowed the characters and stages to appear less angular and more detailed. A popular and commonly discussed feature, one credited to Itagaki, was the level of graphical detail Tecmo put into the animated breasts of the female characters, as Tecmo went so far as to create a physics engine dedicated entirely to the animation of the female characters' breasts. The gameplay of Dead or Alive 2, and all subsequent Dead or Alive games, borrows heavily from the Virtua Fighter series, but makes some key changes that drastically changes the way Dead or Alive is played in comparison to Virtua Fighter. In Dead or Alive 2, the basis of the entire fighting system is a circular relationship between 3 types of moves: blows, throws, and holds, blows beating throws, throws beating holds, and holds beating blows, similar to rock paper scissors. The other defining feature of the game is its stun system. Many attacks can inflict a stun on the opponent, though stun cannot attack or guard, however they can hold. If the attacker lands a non-knockdown, non-launching attack while the opponent is stunned, the opponent will be re-stunned in a new way, depending on what attack was landed. A major difference between Dead or Alive 2 and other similar games is in the safety and non-punishability of attacks, both upon hitting and upon being blocked. Most blows in Dead or Alive 2 can be punished on hit and blocked by each character's faster throws, making blow-based defense very risky. Dead or Alive 2 also featured a new mode called Tag Battle Mode, which implements a tag team fighting system that allows players to choose 2 fighters to form a team, and fight against another pair. Tag Battle Mode allows characters to switch back and forth instantaneously for combo attacks, and even attack simultaneously when timed correctly. This mode allows for the participation of 4 players, something not common in the fighting game genre. Other notable features included introducing CG cutscenes in line with the plot, replacing the original Danger Zone areas and stages with fully interactive ones, allowing players to juggle each other into walls, propelling characters from landmarks for more damage, and upon completing the game, presenting the player with, sometimes ambiguous, endings for each character. Several enhanced editions of the game has been released. Tomonobu Itagaki and Team Ninja were constantly enhancing the game for both the Dreamcast and PlayStation 2 as they worked towards their vision of the ultimate fighting game. The first update to the game was the Dead or Alive 2 Millennium Update, released for the arcade version in January 2000. This made survival and tag battle available from the start, and added school uniforms for Kasumi and Ayane. The Dreamcast port was the first home console version, released early 2000 in North America. It was identical to the arcade Millennium version, but added the usual versus and sparring modes, as well as team battle mode. The PS2 port of Dead or Alive 2 was released as a launch title for the console in Japan. It was released a day after the Dreamcast port. This version added new stages, Crimson, Kokuin and Prairie, and new unlockable costumes. The game engine ran using field rendering instead of frame rendering, thus it appeared much more alias than the Dreamcast ports. This version was buggy and prone to lockup in versus mode. Itagaki and his team were only given 2 months initially to produce a PlayStation 2 port. At the end of this, one of his managers asked to borrow a copy to play, but instead sent him to a production factory. Itagaki was upset by not being able to finish the game on his own terms and fell into a depression, during which he briefly considered quitting the industry. 2 other versions were released before it was re-released on PS2 as DOA 2 Hardcore. The Japanese and European Dreamcast ports, who both included subtle differences between each other. Dead or Alive 2 received universal acclaim, strong sales, and considered as one of the greatest fighting games of all time. On game rankings, the Dreamcast version was met with universal acclaim, while the PlayStation 2 version was very well received. Famitsu scored the Dreamcast version 32 out of 40, and the PS2 version 34 out of 40. Both versions were praised for its graphics, cutscenes and gameplay. Jeff Lundgren reviewed the PlayStation 2 version of the game for Next Generation, rating it 5 stars out of 5, and stated that,
"This is a tremendous game and a must-have, but if you can choose between the 2 versions, PS2 enjoys an edge thanks to all the extras. Just get used to squinting at the 2 bright lights and nasty jaggies."
the game was also notable for improving and popularizing the concept of multi-tiered environments. DOA 2 Hardcore for the PS2 was based on the Japanese version of Dead or Alive 2 for Dreamcast. The game was a launch title for the PlayStation 2 in North America. The hardcore release was finally the complete game director Tomonobu Itagaki had envisioned at the time, featuring many changes compared to its predecessor. Characters, pictures and moves were altered to appear more realistic, lessening the anime look. Some fighting animations were elaborated upon, while others were cut. New stages were added, 8 more than the Dreamcast update. More character outfits were added. Survival mode now only took place in the Danger Zone arena. Overall gameplay speed was increased, and the entire game, including cutscenes, now ran at a full 60 frames per second. In the Dreamcast version, the game ran at 60 FPS, while cutscenes ran at 30. A special items collection feature and menu section was added to appeal to video game collectors. New artworks were added, and a CG gallery section featuring renders of the female characters was added. The player history files were enhanced, and now included statistics on how often the player used each character, and tag battle pairing. Several special moves were added, but left undocumented. English voiceovers were added in addition to the original Japanese voiceovers. In the game Monster Rancher 4, the character Kasumi is unlocked as a trainable monster by going to the shrine, and inserting the DOA 2 Hardcore disc in the PS2. The later Japanese release of Hardcore saw some minor updates, including new cutscenes, a few new costumes, and a new turbo speed option. This was the last Dead or Alive game to be released for a Sony system, as the series became exclusive to the Xbox until the release of Dead or Alive Paradise and Dead or Alive 5. In August 2012, an emulated version of Hardcore was made available as a downloadable game on the Japanese PlayStation Network. Hardcore was also released with universal acclaim. Main criticism of the re-release was the poor English voice dub, much like other English dubbed Japanese video games. Jeff Lundgren also reviewed Hardcore for Next Generation, rating it 5 stars out of 5, and stated that,
"This is the best-looking, most full-featured, most packed with extras version of one of the best fighting games ever made. Buy it, period."
Dead or Alive Ultimate is a remake compilation collection for the Xbox, featuring a high-resolution port of the Sega Saturn version of the first Dead or Alive, and a new remake of Dead or Alive 2, released in 2004, 3 years after the release of Dead or Alive 3. This new remake features a greatly improved graphics engine. As it was created after the debut of Dead or Alive 3, it takes elements and mechanics from both its original iteration and successor. The action of 3D axis movement is as free-formatted as Dead or Alive 3, and a new character from Dead or Alive 3, Hitomi, was placed in the game as an unlockable playable character outside story mode. The biggest set of changes instituted in Ultimate are online play over Xbox Live, and the inclusion of slopes, which are a type of environmental hazard. Ultimate received generally favorable reviews from critics with a score of 84 and 83% from Game Rankings and Metacritic. In Japan, Ultimate was released with a crystal clear blue version of the Xbox system that included a controller of the same color, a copy of Dead or Alive Ultimate, and some bonus Kasumi themed extras.